Have you ever sat at your kitchen table, staring into your coffee, wondering when exactly the child you raised with love and sacrifice became so cold, so sharp with their words? Maybe they roll their eyes when you speak, cut you off mid-sentence, or act like your presence is more of a nuisance than a gift. It's one of the hardest things for any parent to face. When the child you once held in your arms starts speaking to you with more sarcasm than sweetness, more distance than dignity. If you've been feeling confused, hurt, or even ashamed about how your adult child is treating you lately, I want you to know you're not alone. And more importantly, it's not your fault. This video is for you. Today we're going to talk about how to deal with an adult child who's become rude or disrespectful. Not with anger or guilt, but with strength, clarity, and compassion. Because at this stage of life, your peace matters. Your dignity matters. And you deserve relationships that honor both. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It hurts. It really hurts when someone you've given so much to, years of bedtime stories, late-night rides, sacrifices they may never know about, starts acting like your feelings don't count anymore. But here's the truth most people won't tell you. Just because your child is an adult doesn't mean they automatically know how to treat others with kindness or respect. Maturity doesn't magically arrive with a birthday. Sometimes it's delayed. And sometimes it never comes, unless someone steps in and draws a line. Let me say this loud and clear. Setting boundaries with your adult child is not unloving. It's one of the most loving things you can do, for them and for you. So how do we begin? How do you regain your footing when your grown child has started walking all over you? First, you start by reclaiming your emotional space. What do I mean by that? Well, when your child snaps at you, ignores your calls, or talks down to you, it's natural to want to react. Maybe you argue back. Maybe you try to explain yourself. Or maybe you go silent and carry that pain in your chest for days. But what if, instead of reacting, you paused and reminded yourself, their words do not define my worth? You see, one of the most powerful tools you have right now isn't control, it's composure. You can't control how they speak to you, but you can control how you respond. And your calm, grounded response can change everything. Because when you meet disrespect with dignity, you shift the dynamic. You become the anchor in the storm. Let me give you an example. Imagine your son walks in and immediately starts criticizing the way you live. Maybe it's the food in your fridge, or the way you decorate your home, or the fact that you still write checks instead of paying with your phone. It's easy to feel small in those moments. But instead of defending yourself or trying to win his approval, you could say calmly, I appreciate your concern, but this is my home, and I live in a way that makes me feel comfortable. That one sentence does three powerful things. First, it acknowledges their concern without inviting a debate. Second, it asserts your right to live your life on your terms. And third, it sends a quiet message. You don't get to tear me down just because you're my child. The second thing we need to talk about, and this one can be tough, is letting go of the illusion that love means unlimited access. Many of us, especially those of us who grew up in families where sacrifice was the language of love, believe that being a good parent means always being available. Always saying yes. Always forgiving and forgetting without question. But that belief can trap you in a cycle of emotional abuse, where you feel guilty for even thinking about saying, enough. Here's what I want you to hear. Love has limits. Respect has requirements. And your adult child is no longer a teenager figuring things out. If they are consistently rude, cruel, manipulative, or selfish, you are not obligated to keep giving them front row access to your heart. You can love someone deeply and still decide that their behavior is not welcome in your life. One woman I know, let's call her Carol, told me she used to let her daughter call her at all hours of the night, only to be yelled at or guilt-tripped for not doing more. Carol had raised her daughter as a single mom, worked 2 jobs, and still found time to cheer her on at every recital and award ceremony. And yet, now, all her daughter seemed to remember were the times Carol said no. After years of walking on eggshells, Carol finally said, "I love you, but I won't let you speak to me that way anymore." And then she followed through. It wasn't easy. There were tears. There was silence. But eventually something shifted. Her daughter realized that the old tactics no longer worked. And slowly, respectfully, they began rebuilding a new relationship, one with boundaries. Now, I know that every situation is different. Some of you may have adult children struggling with addiction, mental health issues, or unresolved trauma. Others may have children who seem successful on the outside, but cold and disconnected on the inside. Whatever your situation, the principle still stands. You have the right to peace in your own life. And you can begin to reclaim that peace by separating who you are from how they treat you. It helps to think of it this way. You are not just a parent. You are also a person. A person who has lived through joys and heartbreaks, worked hard, given much, and learned more than most people will ever know. You are wise. You are worthy. And just because your child grew up doesn't mean they've outgrown the need to treat others with kindness. So when they say something hurtful, take a breath. Instead of engaging in their chaos, step back. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't need to earn their respect. You already deserve it. And if they can't give it to you now, that's their journey to figure out. Yours is to protect your peace. This is where the real transformation begins. Not in changing your child, but in changing how you allow yourself to be treated. Because when you rise above the disrespect, when you stand firm in your values, you don't just reclaim your strength, you remind them of what real maturity looks like. And maybe, just maybe, your example will plant a seed. You know, sometimes the most painful part isn't even the words your adult child says, it's the silence. It's those long stretches where they don't call, don't visit, don't acknowledge holidays or birthdays. And when they finally do show up, there's tension in the air, like you're walking on glass in your own home. That silence can feel like rejection. But here's what I want you to consider. Silence isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's space. And space can be healing. You are not the same person you were 20 or 30 years ago, and neither is your child. They're navigating their own path, sometimes poorly, and unfortunately, that can mean projecting their pain, frustrations, or immaturity onto you. But you don't have to absorb it. You can allow space and still love them from afar. That's not giving up. That's wisdom. Now, we talked earlier about reclaiming your emotional space and recognizing your worth. But there's another powerful shift that can happen when you decide to stop trying to fix the relationship by sacrificing yourself. That shift is learning how to detach with love. Detaching with love doesn't mean giving someone the cold shoulder. It means stepping back from toxic patterns while still holding a space of care in your heart. It's saying, I care about you, but I won't allow you to treat me like this anymore. It's learning to protect your energy while staying true to your values. This can be especially important when your adult child uses guilt as a weapon. You know the phrases, "You were never there for me," "You owe me," "If you really loved me, you would." Those words cut deep, don't they? Because as a parent, guilt is something you've carried more than once. But guilt is not the same as love. And your love is not a credit card they get to charge endlessly. When guilt creeps in, take a pause. Ask yourself, is this guilt based on truth or on their unmet expectations? Remind yourself of all the good you've done. No parent is perfect, but chances are you showed up again and again in ways they'll never fully understand. You held their hand through childhood illnesses, worked overtime to buy their school clothes, stood in the crowd at games and graduations. That kind of love can't be erased by a few sharp words. One powerful response when guilt is being thrown at you is simply, "I'm sorry you feel that way. That wasn't my intention." It acknowledges their feeling without agreeing to the narrative. It puts the emotional ownership back where it belongs, on them. Another thing we have to be willing to accept is that not all adult children want help. They want control. That can be especially true if they think you're getting older, slowing down, or needing more support. Suddenly, they start criticizing your choices, second-guessing your finances, telling you what to do with your time or home. And while some of it may come from a place of concern, it can also become a way of dominating the relationship. One man I spoke to, let's call him Robert, shared how his daughter had begun managing his life like he was a child. She'd show up unannounced, go through his paperwork, tell him he shouldn't be driving anymore, and act like every decision he made needed her approval. It reached a point where Robert felt more like her employee than her father. So he sat her down and said, "I've raised you to be strong and independent, but I haven't stopped being that myself. I value your care, but I need you to treat me with respect. Let's find a way to talk to each other like adults." It wasn't an easy conversation, but it opened the door to a better kind of dialogue, one where boundaries were respected and love wasn't confused with control. And that brings me to something deeply important: your right to have boundaries, even with your own children. In fact, especially with your own children, boundaries are not walls to shut people out. They're fences with gates, where you decide who gets to enter and under what conditions. You can set a boundary and still be a loving parent. You can say, "I don't accept yelling in this house. I'm happy to talk when you're ready to be respectful. I love you, but I won't tolerate name-calling or manipulation." At first, they might resist. They might accuse you of being cold or stubborn. But over time, those boundaries become a silent teacher. They model what healthy relationships look like. And in some cases, they're the very thing that can lead your child toward growth. One woman told me she set a rule that if her son cursed at her on the phone, the call would end immediately. No yelling, no warning, just a calm goodbye. The first time it happened, he called back angry. She didn't budge. The second time, he cursed again. She ended the call. By the third time, he stopped. And slowly, the tone of their conversations began to change. What you allow will continue. So if you've been tolerating disrespect, even with a heavy heart, it's not too late to begin shifting the dynamic. It starts with clarity, followed by consistency. No need for lectures or drama, just quiet strength. And let's be honest, it's not just about them anymore. It's about you. You've lived through enough storms in life to know what peace feels like and what it costs when it's gone. Protecting that peace is not selfish. It's survival, it's wisdom, and it's your right. I also want to remind you of something else, something you may have forgotten along the way. You still have the power to build joy into your life, no matter what your child chooses. That could mean reconnecting with old friends, joining a local group, taking that painting class you've been putting off, or simply spending time in nature. Your life doesn't end at your child's bad behavior. You are more than a parent. You are a whole person with dreams, joys, and dignity that no one gets to take from you. So, if your child is acting out, showing disrespect, or pushing you to the edge, take a deep breath. You don't have to solve it all today. You don't have to carry their emotions on your shoulders. What you can do is choose how you will show up, for yourself, first and foremost. Because when you start choosing peace over chaos, truth over guilt, and boundaries over blind loyalty, you don't just change the relationship, you change your life. There's something incredibly freeing that happens when you stop trying to be everything to everyone, including your grown child, and finally start being kind to yourself. Many parents in your shoes feel worn down by the emotional roller coaster. You might feel like you've tried everything, talking, giving, forgiving, waiting, and yet nothing seems to change. That kind of emotional exhaustion is real. It weighs on your heart. It creeps into your health. It steals the joy from your days. But today, I want you to hear something loud and clear. You are allowed to let go of what's hurting you. Now, letting go doesn't mean you stop loving your child. It means you stop trying to force a connection that only drains you. It means you allow yourself to heal, to breathe, to live without being on emotional call 24/7. For many parents, this can feel like the ultimate heartbreak, almost like a form of grief. And in a way, it is. You're grieving the relationship you thought you'd have. The kind of adult child who'd call just to say hi, who'd come by for dinner, who'd treat you with affection and appreciation. But in that grief, there's also room for growth. Because once you stop chasing after the version of them you wish existed, you can start reconnecting with a version of you that might have gotten buried under years of guilt, sacrifice, and silent suffering. This is where your power returns. It starts with something as simple as choosing peace. Maybe that means silencing your phone when they call during a bad mood and returning the call when you're emotionally grounded. Maybe it means setting firm limits on how often they can drop by unannounced. Or maybe it means stepping away for a season, giving both of you space to reflect, rather than continuing a pattern that only leads to pain. Remember, some people won't respect you until you respect yourself. And when you do, something interesting happens. The dynamic shifts. Either they step up or they step back. And either way, you win. Because you are no longer at the mercy of someone else's emotional storms. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What if they never change? That's a valid question. And the truth is, some don't. Some adult children stay bitter, demanding, or distant. But even if they don't change, you can. And that's where the peace begins. You can stop waiting for their approval. You can stop bending over backwards for love that never comes. You can stop explaining yourself to someone who isn't listening. You don't need permission to protect your heart. One of the most powerful things I've seen some older parents do is create what I call an emotional reset. They stop trying to fix the past or predict the future and instead ask, what do I want the rest of my life to feel like? Not look like, feel like. That question changes everything. Because at this age, peace is more valuable than control. Joy is more nourishing than guilt. And healthy boundaries are more essential than ever. So what does an emotional reset look like? For some, it means limiting contact with their child to brief, respectful conversations only. For others, it might mean writing a letter, not to send, but to express everything they've held in. For many, it means finding support, joining a group, talking to a counselor, reading stories from other parents who've walked this same road and come out stronger. You are not the only one. There are thousands of others, parents just like you, who've struggled with rude, critical, or emotionally distant adult children. And many of them have learned how to move forward with grace, not bitterness. That can be your path too. There's an old saying, you can't change the wind, but you can adjust the sails. Your child may continue to be who they are, at least for now, but you can adjust how you respond. You can chart a new course for your emotional well-being starting today. Start with this. Take care of your spirit. If talking to your child leaves you feeling hurt every time, that's a sign to pause. You don't have to keep walking into the same fire hoping it won't burn this time. Step back. Create space. Give yourself the gift of healing. You are not walking away from your child, you are walking toward your peace. And don't underestimate the ripple effect that peace can create. Sometimes when you stop reacting, when you stop pleading, when you begin to live with quiet strength, it catches their attention. It may take time. It may take years. Or maybe it never comes. But either way, you're not standing still in suffering anymore. You're moving forward. You deserve to be around people who make you feel good about who you are, who enjoy your company, who talk to you with kindness. That might be a sibling, a neighbor, a new friend at church or the local senior center. Life doesn't end because one relationship is strained. Sometimes that space creates room for new love, new connections, and new joy to enter. And here's something else to remember. Your legacy isn't just about how your child treats you. It's about the way you live your life despite how they treat you. It's about your resilience, your kindness, your ability to love without losing yourself. So speak gently to yourself. You are doing better than you think. You've come through a lot and you're still standing. You still smile. You still hope. That is strength. And if you've ever wondered, did I do enough? Let me say this clearly, yes, you did. You did the best you could with what you had, and that is more than enough. So let's breathe together right now. In and out. Let that tension leave your shoulders. Let that guilt roll off your back. You don't have to carry it anymore. You've earned your peace. Before we wrap up, I want to encourage you, if this video spoke to you, if you felt seen or understood in any way, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters. And when you share, you might help another parent feel less alone in their journey. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, Strong Elderly Life, where we share content made especially for you, encouraging, practical, and filled with hope. Because you deserve to live strong. You deserve to feel heard. And you deserve to move forward with your head held high. Here's to living your best life, on your terms, with love, peace, and strength.